All right, welcome back to our coaching network. I am Pat Kern again, one of the co-founders here. Super excited about this. So been talking to Braxton here. This is our first of 3 we're doing this summer about hosting these leadership and culture roundtables. So I'm going to shut up, listen, take some notes. Braxton, I'm going to shoot it to you. Who'll lead the dance? We've got Coach Mark Smith, Coach Joshua Eargle here as well. Super excited to hear from you guys tonight.
Hey, Pat, appreciate you allowing us the opportunity to do this. Man, I'm super excited about this event. I think this is going to be incredibly valuable. I know if it's not any valuable for anybody else, it's going to be great for me. I got my notepad ready to go right here to listen to these 2 guys. And so I'm going to introduce them quickly. Then I'm going to let them tell a little bit each about kind of where they've been in their time. And so my name is Braxton Harris. I'm the associate head coach here at Campbell University, the recruiting coordinator and coach the linebackers here. And so with us, we have Joshua Eargle, who is the tight ends coach at Florida International University, and then also Mark Smith, who coaches the linebackers at Colorado University. And so I'm going to let them kind of tell their background. Coach Eargle, if you don't mind kind of starting off, and then Coach Smith following. Then, man, I've got something on each of these guys that I want to share that kind of near and dear to my heart. I promise it'll be good, guys, so don't worry about that. But, man, Coach Eargle, if you'll kind of go ahead and tell us a little bit about your past and where you come from.
Yeah, and I'll go really briefly. First of all, thank you, Braxton, for inviting me. I'm honored. I'm ready to roll too with the notepad. I really think this will be beneficial to me, but a lot of coaches that asked a lot of questions most of the time. But just real briefly, grew up in Brownwood, Texas, most of my life. Finished my high school career in Sulphur Springs, Texas, playing for my uncle Chuck King, who was a Texas high school coach for up to 30 years, and following James Cameron around the state of Texas, and so. And really, he was like my father figure. I had an opportunity to play football at the University of Memphis and got in underneath Jeff Bauer. And when Rip Shear was my first head coach there, played for Tommy West there. Go down to Southern Mississippi, where Rip Shear is now the offensive coordinator for Jeff Bauer, who was the coach of the decade, starting out in Conference USA way back in the early 2000s. And so that's where I got my start. And then it's been a journey of faith and football since then, and family. And we've had a really, really good time. In 2013 to 2015, I had a highlight of being the head football coach at East Texas Baptist University and working with those young men. And it's been the best 3 years of my career. I've enjoyed every second that I was there, the building process and where it was at. And when we had the opportunity that we felt like God was moving us, we went on to Austin Peay State University. Where we were a coordinator up there, run game coordinator for 2 years, and the offensive coordinator the 3rd year for Will Healy. And then had an opportunity to go with Les Miles to Kansas for 2 years. And that ended abruptly this past spring, and got to go back to my alma mater at Memphis for the fall with Ryan Silverfield and met Mike McIntyre. And man, you talk about a blessing to work for a guy like him right now. It's been a breath of fresh air, and I'm literally walking around with the notepad every day, just trying to glean from him and learn what he's doing because of who he is with his family and off the field, but more importantly, how he's raising these kids up in our program and how he's changing our program at FIU. So that's just really, really quickly, that's where we've been here in the recent times.
Perfect. Coach Smith, if you don't mind, kind of talking a little bit about your past.
Well, Coach Eargle, thank you for what you said. And I echo what you said about Mike McIntyre. I have never worked with him, but he has been a good friend. And I always love this about coaching, that there's so many connections between people, and we can get on this call together right now. And then, it brought up so many memories of my time with Mike. He and I went to church together. I was a high school coach in the Dallas area, and he was coaching with the Cowboys, and we went to church together, and our families would have lunch after church, and developed a great friendship. And coaching at Colorado now, and his footprint is all over the building that I'm in from his time that was there. But what a wonderful man. You are correct. Braxton, Pat, thank you for having me here. My name is Mark Smith. I coach the inside linebackers at the University of Colorado. I'm going on my 2nd season now at Colorado. I affectionately refer to myself, I am a proud Texas high school football coach. That's who I am at my core. I grew up in Abilene, Texas. And my parents still live there. We go back there and see them quite often. In fact, my kids, I'm sending them there for a week here to go see them starting tomorrow. It's summertime here, and they're going back there, and I'm jealous. I love my time growing up there. My high school coach was my hero. And the day that Randy Allen moved in to Christopher Drive, which is right down the street, he moved on my street, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever that the high school coach lived right on my street. And I watched him. I studied him. I don't come from a family of coaches or a background in this profession, but I knew I loved that man and I wanted to be just like him. And from an early age, I knew coaching was what I wanted to do. And I played in his program, and he's still coaching high school football now at Highland Park in Dallas. And I spent 3 years coaching at SMU, and it was a blessing. I got to be by him on a daily basis. So my path a little different than Coach Eargle's. I spent 14 years as a high school coach. I just climbed the ladders. I mean, my goal was to be a head high school coach in Texas, and I got to do that. The Lord blessed me, and I was very fortunate. Was at some great programs and won a lot of games. And I got to meet great college coaches like Braxton Harris, who came into my school and recruited my guys. So coaching in college now for the last 8 years, it's been a transition for me, and I've loved every minute of it. I think coaching and impacting young people is what it's all about. And then I just get to do it on a slightly bigger stage than I did it. But I feel like at my core, a high school football coach is who I am. And I believe that because it's relational in high school still. And I'm a relational college football coach. When things have become more transactional, I'm more relational. And because I'm who I am. I mean, I'm wearing my flannel shirt, like you said, Braxton, at the beginning. I got my boots on right here on my feet. And this is who I am. We all have to be who we are.
Yes, sir.
So, yes, I am. But I 14 years as a high school coach. I got my first job in college at SMU. Spent 3 years there, and then went to Arkansas for 2. Chad Morris hired me at SMU. He wanted to incorporate a few high school guys on his staff there. I GA'd at Oklahoma prior to that for a couple of seasons, and then SMU to Arkansas. We got fired at Arkansas, like every college coach. At some point, you're going to get fired. It happens to all of us, and it happened to us. And then we went from Arkansas. The pandemic hit. It was a little weird being in between jobs during that. I took a defensive coordinating job at Long Island University in New York, way outside of my comfort zone, but I'm so glad I did. And a lot of what I have to share today later will be about my experience there. Defensive coordinator at Long Island and FCS school. I got to install my own defense at the college level. It was wonderful. The people there were great. And then I was fortunate to get offered a job at Colorado a year later and going on my second season here now, coaching the linebackers and recruiting coordinator there. So that's kind of my story right there in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Well, both these guys have been fortunate enough to cross paths for me in different places. Just a little bit kind of bio for me on these guys is Coach Eargle and I met when he was the head football coach at East Texas Baptist. At the time, I was the defense coordinator at Texas Lutheran University, and he came into a program that had always been underperforming and hadn't ever achieved what everybody thought they could. Well, that changed very quickly when Coach Eargle stepped on campus. One thing I can say is playing against him. I've never had the ability to be on the same staff with him yet. That's what I use the word yet, because that's a great opportunity for us. Jennifer and I would love that because we love you guys so much. But his teams every time he played them, man, they had a swagger and a confidence about them. And you knew when you stepped foot on with them that, man, that's going to be a fist fight, that they're going to come out swinging. And those kids believed it. It wasn't just him that believed it. He got his kids to believe it. And we'll talk a little bit about that as culture kind of goes on and leadership goes along. But, that's something about Coach Eargle that I figured out from very early being around him. And then my time with Coach Smith. I met Coach Smith when he was the head coach at LD Bell High School in Texas. It was, if you don't know that area, that's probably the toughest district in the state of Texas. I know Coach Smith would probably kind of feel something way about that. But he had everybody and their mom come through LD Bell High School. And I was, again, a defensive coordinator at Texas Lutheran University, a D3 school down in Texas. And man, Coach Smith was so kind in how he spoke to me and how he treated me. I'll never forget, I'd been in schools a couple times and I just had our first son. And I walked in the door, and the first thing he said, he goes, "Hey, man, Braxton, how's your son?" He knew that we'd had a little boy, and he didn't have to know that about me. But that kind of shows you a little bit about who he is as a man. And so I wanted to share those things because those are two things that you can't get in a bio and you can't get in a sheet of paper on these two guys. You have to experience that in their high quality men. And so I want to kind of get going here. We can talk about that all day, but I want to kind of get here for the reason that we're here is to talk. And the first thing I want to talk about is we talked about this as a culture and leadership discussion. And so I'm very big on those two words, but they mean something to everybody. And I think we can all kind of learn different things about it. So if Coach Smith, if you don't mind leading off right here, if you don't mind in your words and kind of you, who you are, is define culture for us, and then define, what it is to you specifically.
Culture is, in my mind, this has become kind of a real important phase of what we do. And it's critical in terms of an organization and having things in alignment to be able to achieve a common result. So, culture to me, I'm a performance pathway guy. And what that is to me is that I believe that the leaders in the building, okay, whether it's the head football coach who is over the football program, whether it's a defensive coordinator over the defense, offense, whatever, or myself, the linebackers coach over my group, the leaders, put forth a culture, okay, within their organization, their room, their unit, their team, and then that drives a certain behavior that leads to a certain result. That's the performance pathway. Leaders drive the culture that produces a behavior that leads to a result. So I believe that the culture within that building is set forth by the leaders that are around. So what are we going to be about? What is our team going to be about? And as an assistant coach now, I've been a head coach at the high school level. As an assistant coach, what my job is to make sure that I'm a mouthpiece for our head coach, that I do it exactly the way that he wants it done, that I'm the best assistant coach that I can be, and whatever he sets as the culture of our program, that's what I want to make sure that we get out of my room. So the performance pathway with the leadership and the culture and the behavior and the result, I always ask my guys to reverse engineer that. If the results aren't what we want, then let's take a step back and let's look at our behavior and see if our behavior is in alignment with the culture that was set forth to try to achieve the result that we wanted. And so that's a conversation that we have in the linebacker room quite often. And, we have this performance pathway in our room with the leaders and the culture, the behavior, and the results. So my guys know it, like the back of their hands, and we'll be able to discuss that on a daily basis in there. So that's kind of my vision on this. Now, I don't work in a building where the performance pathway is taught that way. I teach that within my own room, but I feel it's my responsibility as an assistant coach to make sure that I'm that mouthpiece in setting forward everything that our head coach wants in terms of the culture and the temperature within the building. So it's 3 years now for our head coach at Colorado, and we believe we have it exactly the way we want it. It's not an overnight process, as we all know. Here. It takes time to get that way. And yeah, Coach Eargle, Braxton, you've been head coaches, and this is a challenge, and it's a daily fight to make sure that you're bringing the right people in the building, and you're reinforcing the things that need to get reinforced, and you're eliminating behavior that needs to be eliminated.
Absolutely. Well, I love the performance pathway. That's something I've always used to break it down, because like you said, you get to the end and everybody knows the result isn't what they wanted.
Right.
But all those steps that go before it, that's what it's all about, is how do you get to that place? And so that's something I've used a lot. So Coach Eargle, if you don't mind kind of sharing a little bit more about culture and, maybe how you use it.
Sure, man, guys, that's so good. I mean, culture is one of those hot words, hot topic buzzwords, that is going around now, but you're right. I believe this. I believe culture is the living, breathing heart of our team, or your team. It's by which all decisions are made and measured. Living and breathing, because it's constantly growing and developing. Some guys who, if you may be out there and you don't believe in developing culture, you got a culture. You just may not be investing in that culture, because if you invite somebody into your program, they're gonna see what's living and breathing and what's coming out of your coaches, what's coming out of your players. You guys just hit on it. Your product on the field is a reflection of everything that you're doing in your building. And so it's living, it's active, there's life and there's breath in your culture, and you've got to really invest in that, spend time. I believe it's the heart and soul of your team. I mean, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So what's coming out of us is coming from what's in us. And I believe culture is the easiest reflection of all of that. And then when a plumb line, go old school biblical on you, and they hang the plumb line and they see if the house is level, they see if the house is being built upright. What's our measuring stick for our program? And that, again, that's what culture is for you. So everything that's coming in and out of us, our product, we're measuring it back against that plumb line, against where we want to be, who we want to be, and how we want to do it. And that's kind of the simplest way I've always kind of talked about culture. It's just active living, our standard for who we are and what we want to be. And then are we meeting that culture? Because either we are or we aren't. And I know it's always a process, but it's just something you can't neglect. It's a constant day in, day out. You've got to be intentional with it. And it's growing in one direction or the other. So we're as a leader, and like Coach Smith just hit on, like as a tight end coach for me, I mean, I better be doing that in the tight end room. I better coach in the tight end room for my head football coach, Mike McIntyre. And he do that. He needs me to be sure that his culture is get implement in that room and be the head coach of that room. And so our culture is growing in that room.
Yeah, I love what you hit on there, because I've always kind of defined culture, and it, like you said, is it's happening now. Whether what is happening, that's the debate, right? But culture is there, culture is growing, and I've always liked it defined. It's either culture is developed by being disciplined, or it's by default. So if you're not doing something and it's default, then what does that look like, and where do you end up in that spot? And for my room as a linebackers coach, kind of to your point, Coach Eargle, I'm responsible for the culture in my room,
That's right.
and what do I put out on that football field? Culture is, for me, is not what you say, it's what you do. It's plain and simple. It's got to come action. That's something that's always been really important to me, and in my life, not just in football, is action. I think that's a big piece of the puzzle is your beliefs have to spur an action, right? If they don't, they're not really beliefs. They're not anything worth fighting for. They're just default. You're just living your life in that spot. And so I love being able to hear other guys talk about that, because I think too many times culture is a word that we all just throw out there, and we think culture is this group of words that we put up on a billboard, right? We put it up in the room, and we put it up on every room, and we go in as a head coach, because this is who we are. But just because you put it up there doesn't mean if you're not being intentional and being disciplined in implementing that culture, it's just there on a wall, and it just default in that spot. So I love being able to hear that. Coach Eargle, if you don't mind, kind of follow up and kind of go with our second word that we talked about is influence. We talked about culture. We talked about leadership. Talk to me about leadership a little bit, and kind of your definition of that and how you implement that.
Leadership, I wrote down 4 things. Number 1, I believe you got to cast a vision as a leader. Without a vision, people perish. And so we got to know where we're going. And they want to know what the end destination is. I think you got to have an outline to the plan. How are we going to get there, coach? Where are you taking us? How are you going to take us there, coach? I believe there's got to be accountability is a huge thing. You got to hold them accountable as a leader. I think accountability is a big thing that's missing in a lot of different areas, and a lot of programs that struggle, and a lot of things in society. It's just being accountability and holding your feet to the fire. And the 4th thing I wrote down was take them where they can't take themselves. And so in those 4 things, real quickly, leadership, coach, what do you want this thing to look like? Where's the end game for you? What's the carrot you're kind of hanging out there for us? That's how the culture definition, I guess, for me bleeds over into leadership. And then the outline of the plan is like, if you do these things, man, if you do this right here, it's going to lead to where you want to go. It's going to lead to our outcome. And then the accountability piece like we just hit on. I think as you start really, really good with accountability. Like we're about to start over in the fall season, or then we get them back on campus for the summer and that type of deal. And man, it starts really, really good, and we're hitting all cylinders. And all of a sudden it gets to that point, because we have a great teacher that we're all involved with called the game of football. And you get to that point where everybody starts getting fatigued, and they start getting tired, and maybe some of the things get mundane. And all of a sudden they get to a crossroads in their life, and they got to make decisions. And if decisions are leading away from our culture, then us as leaders, it's our job to hold them accountable to the culture. And if we've got a really, really good team, then we've got some good peers and leaders on that football team, that locker room, that are also holding them accountable. Because that's what we want our leaders to do, ultimately take control of the football team from our locker room. And then the magic, I think, really, really happens with, all right, coach, we're doing everything you're asking us to do. Now take me someplace that I can't take myself. Take us someplace that we can't take ourselves. How are you going to get us there? But more importantly, let's go and show us where that's happening, where that's taking place out there. And that's briefly the 4 points I wrote down about leadership.
Love that. Coach Smith, you want to kind of add something to that?
Yeah, I love what Coach said about the accountability piece in that. I think that's so critical. I tell my guys within my linebacker room, and you know this too, Braxton, and coaching at least the linebackers on defense, they're like the quarterback. So they've got to be, whether they like it or not, they're in a leadership role. And with how much they communicate and the things that go on from that position, and we have to teach that, and we have to show that within our time that we have with them. So, you know, whether it goes back to my time at Bell High School when you recruited my school, and I had my leadership council, or my linebackers here at Colorado, I tell them the same thing. I said, to be a great leader, you have to give people a reason to follow you. Okay, so to be a leader, people, you have to have a reason to follow you, and it's not always the same. So, but one thing is consistent with that, like Coach Eargle just mentioned right there, the accountability factor. If you're a guy that other people on the team cannot count on, you are not a leader. So you don't have to be vocal all the time. You don't have to be the rah-rah person all the time. But leadership, you have to give people a reason to follow you. Just like those guys out there, as we had our guys, just like Coach just mentioned, they reported back yesterday, and we had our first team run today, that as they reported back from the summer. So I reminded them before that, this is those moments where people are watching you, and I want them to say, the young players on the team, the veteran players on the team, be like, man, whatever that guy's doing, I want to do it the way he's doing it. So, and it just lead by example, lead by your words, lead by your actions. You can never have a moment where you lose control, or man, I'm just outside of my body right now in this experience, because people are watching and they're observing. So give people a reason to follow you, because people are looking for a reason not to follow you. That's the way that our society is right now. They're waiting for you to slip up. They're waiting for you to make a mistake. In the world we live in now, you make that one time, you may be out. So give people a reason to follow you. Make sure that you're doing things the right way. That accountability piece is huge, just like Coach mentioned. And that's my job. I have written on the board in my room about my job as a coach is to take you from being, and this is a leadership responsibility, is to take you from being willing to eager. Okay. So we talk about that a lot within the room. And so my job as the leader of the linebackers, I want you to go from willing to eager. And I think there's a big difference in those words. And I'll ask my players about that within the room, the young guys that come in, or when we have recruits on campus and they're there with their families, and they're like, tell me about what this means here, Coach, on the wall. And I reverse it back on them to see. Some people think that that's the same term, but I see a big difference in that. You know, everyone that is sitting in my room is willing. Okay. But a willingness to me means I'll do what's required of me. I'll do what you have asked me to do. I'll do everything that you asked me to do. Okay. But there's a difference in my mind in just being willing to do that, but being eager to do that, where I want to go out there. You won't have to ask me. I'm already out there doing the things that you want me to do. So my job as the leader in the linebackers room is I want to make sure that I take them from being willing when they get into my room to being eager by the time that they leave my room. So I think that's the big bridge in leadership there. And then once they have that eagerness to them, then they start attracting others to go with them. And leadership is not a singular thing. It is a collective thing. And I want to make sure that we have an entire room, a group of people that can be that example for our defense. I know that's what my head coach is wanting out of the linebackers room. So I'm trying, just like Coach said, he's trying to do the best he can for Mike McIntyre. So am I for Carl Durrell. And they should expect to get the most out of us because of the positions that we're in. And so that's what I'm trying to do. But I believe that's it. The willing to eager is a big part of my room. And then give people a reason to follow you. If you want to be a leader, they got to have a reason to follow you. They're not just going to follow you because. Give them a reason to. Yeah. What do you think, Braxton? I know you've been in this position. You've been a head coach of you and Coach both of a college football program, and also a coordinator and a position coach now. And then how that's different in each of those roles also is an important question.
Well, I think it's kind of like both you guys said. I don't think my emphasis on leadership has changed going from a head coach to a position coach, because I believe that if we don't get those things right, it doesn't matter if you can read a guard or if you can track back on a movement piece. That really doesn't matter. I'm with you, Coach, 100% in my room. I want my guys to be the tip of the spear, you know,
Right.
and that hasn't changed. When I was a head football coach, I wanted my team to be that, right? That was my influence that I had, was I wanted my team to embody those things. And so going into a running your own room, that hadn't changed, because maybe the only thing that's changed is maybe I put more emphasis on it now, knowing what I knew as a head football coach, that the X and O's ain't always going to win you the games that you need to win. It's the leadership intangibles. It's the leadership qualities. That's going to make the difference. Those are the things that are going to make a difference in that deal. And so a couple of things that you hit on that I love was talking about the eager. We always define the word combative as ready and eager for the fight. You know, I wanted guys in our program to, hey, it's game day, or linebacker wise, take it to a new level. Coaches, hey, it's inside drill, man, let's go get inside drill. I want some of that in my life, right? I wanted that eagerness to be able to be there, because I think it makes a difference. And to your point, if somebody's excited and eager about something, everybody wants to be excited about something. Everybody wants to believe in something. As much as they tell you, I don't, and I don't care, and they want to pull the I'm too cool for school, at the end of the day, we all want to believe in something. And when they see belief in somebody else, that makes a difference. And that's
Braxton, that is that eagerness in every aspect, just like you said. And it goes back to, you know, we'll do the drills in practice, you know, right there from time to time. And sometimes, man, the offense is having trouble or something. And then the head coach wants to do a drill, and all of a sudden the ball's on the 1 yard line. And it's they got it on the goal line. And then we all see it with our coach. We've all been head coaches. And how does your defense take the field now? You know, when they have 1 yard to defend, as opposed to if they had 99 yards to defend.
Yep.
And we want that eagerness, you know, to go out there and yes, I'm excited for this. What an opportunity. And when you can get that switch in the mind right there within your team and within your players, and I think that's part of the leadership discussion that we're having. You know, we're all a little bit twisted anyways to be coaching the game we do. So you have to be that way, where, man, if I got 1 yard to defend, or if I got 99 to defend, my eagerness is the same way to go out there and do that. So you just don't want that team that's got their shoulders down, like, oh geez, here we go. You know, we gave the ball on the 1 yard line. You want that eagerness, and then it permeates through your team. When it happens, like Coach said, it's magical. It becomes magical within your team when you get that type of an attitude running through your program.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to cut you off, Braxton.
No.
I just think of that right there. Yeah.
No, I love that. And one of the things you talked about was consistency. And that kind of leads me kind of to the next place we're going in this process. Is, for me, I was fortunate to come up around a really successful program, being a part of the University of Mary Hardin Baylor. I know each of you have your own feelings about that place in a different way, from a different seat. But I was very fortunate. We were able to be successful. And if I look back, the key piece that I saw out of that winning program was the consistency piece of it. Through the good, through the bad, through the ebbs and the flow, the consistency of the coaching staff, the consistency of the leadership, that, hey, on every Tuesday, hey, man, we're doing inside drill. And we were going to do inside drill. It didn't matter. Now, we all say we have these great ideas and this is what we're going to do. I literally saw 3 running backs go down an inside drill on a Tuesday of a game week. And we kept doing the drill because that's who we were. And so one of the things that I saw in a successful program is consistency, to have a belief, kind of like you're talking about. This is who we are, and this is what makes us, and this is what makes us go. And so the consistency piece, I think, is the piece that is not as sexy, is not as cool. Consistency of showing up to work every single day with that eagerness. See, that's the difference, is showing up with that eagerness every day. Besides just showing up. Sometimes we have kids that come into our program that we have to guide them. Just showing up ain't good enough. You got to show up with that eagerness and that consistency. And that's what I've seen out of winning programs that I've been a part of. Coach Eargle, talk a little bit about you. You've been a part of really successful programs, both as a head coach, as an assistant. What's a key piece to that you've kind of seen that you see in that?
Well, I really wanted to come up with something for this question. When you think about winning programs, just something that's like man, really out there, really cutting edge, like what you're talking about. And we're on the same wavelength. You come out with consistency. I'm coming out with work ethic. I just like I was round and around on all the cool things you could talk about right here on Winning Programs. But with everybody, it's not found on Twitter. It's not found on social media. You can't put a price tag on it. It's just good old-fashioned sweat equity. And Winning Programs have a way of paying a price so high that they're not willing to surrender. They're not willing to give up. You're not going to ever get a slip up from a Winning Program. And like that school you were talking about, you had the opportunity to play for.
Listen, he won't even say it. He still won't even say it. Listen at it.
You had to show up against them. You had to give everything you had for it to be a close game in the fourth quarter, which I never had the opportunity for it to be a close game. But you play Winning Programs to establish that consistency. I just believe it goes back to there's nothing fancy about it. It's got to be a work ethic, and it's got to be an unbelievable commitment day in and day out. And there's a consistency that we pay a price so high that I'm not going to give you anything. You're going to come take this from me if you want to come.
I love what you just said, Coach. And I think that has become so critical in an evaluation piece in my recruiting of a young man is somebody that thinks that way, as a high school player. If you can find somebody that thinks that way, that has just like that work ethic that you're talking about, that refuse to lose, I will take somebody that may not have the measurables that somebody else has, that the NFL says this is the 10-year standard at this position, but that they have those intangibles in. So I think that's become a critical piece, that I try to identify in the recruiting process, exactly what you're just talking about. I mean, if you're looking for tight ends and you're coaching tight ends, I want to find a guy that's going to run a split zone, that is going to go put his face all over that edge defender right there. And destroy him. Not the guy that comes in there and kind of gets tentative right at the last second, right. That eagerness that we're talking about to go and do that. So, and then you're like, man, that guy loves playing football. This is important to him. This right here is something that that he can't live without. And that leads to the eagerness, Braxton, that we're talking about. That leads to this work ethic the coach is talking about, the sweat equity. This game is won with tough players that love playing this game. Right. And I mean, and it is, and it's different when you go around and recruit. It's just different. It's hard for these high school coaches to teach and coach the same way that they used to back when you and I were playing. And I can remember being in junior high in Abilene, Texas, and our junior high head coach still smoked cigarettes. He called, he called everybody up.
He got excited right there.
Sorry, I got excited. I lost my deal. He called everybody up at the end of practice, and he'd just be smoking cigarettes and say, "Come here, boys." And we would be sitting right there just listening as intent as we could listen, everything that he had to say. And it was just a time where, you could be transparent. And that's what we are in this game. We can be transparent. We can just talk about what Coach just talked about, this eagerness, this willingness, this toughness that we have to have, this work ethic that you have to win this game, the sweat equity that it requires. And in a world where we want things immediately and we want to be gratified immediately, and I want everything that I want right now, or I'm going to the transfer portal, or I'm going to another area. Leadership and culture are so critical, these two topics that we're talking about, that if you can have the right pieces in place and have everything going in the right direction, you can eliminate a lot of these problems in advance. So I'm glad we're having this discussion. I'm learning a lot from you guys. Sorry about my excitement right there.
No, I love
it. Bring all that, Coach. All the time. So make sure.
One thing you said, you talked about in the recruiting process, talking about leadership, and talking about finding out if they love the game. Corky Nelson, I don't know if you guys remember that name. Corky Nelson was the defensive coordinator at Baylor a long time for Grant Taft, Texas guys, and head coach at North Texas. Well, he was the defensive coordinator when I got to Mary Hardin Baylor. He and Pete Fredenberg, best buddies forever. And he sat me down one time and he told me, I asked him, just picking his brain. He said, when you're recruiting somebody, Braxton, he goes, ask them if they love football. Ask them if they love football. And when he told me, I thought, Coach, well, I mean, they get a chance to go play college football. Who wouldn't love that? And he just said, ask them, Braxton. And so over the course of my career, that's something I've made a point to always do. Hey, man, do you love football? And it's amazing what you get. And you can watch a kid, he's sitting in his chair and he starts squirming. You're like, oh man, this ain't good. He's having to think about this question, you know? And then it's also amazing when you see that kid that he does exactly what you do. He jumps up and Coach, I can't live without football, right? That's the kid I want to go to work with every day.
You know, there's a lot of it too that they, I want to find that kid that you said that to, and then there's also the kid that they think they love football, but then college football is a different love that is required of this game to do this. And I'm gonna share a quick story with you right here, and for Coach as well. I describe it this way to guys. So I give them the example as I'm recruiting a young man. There's 1,460 days, okay, in 4 years of going to college. That's the average college experience is 4 years, 1,460 days. So 60 of those days are going to be game day, okay? So if you play 15 games a year, you've had a great season, whether it's Texas high school football, whether it's in North Carolina, whether it's in Florida, whether it's in Colorado. If you've played 15 games, you've had a great season. So 15 games a season times 4 years is 60 game days. And I know that you're going to be fired up for game day, whether you're playing Brownwood or you're going down and playing Sweetwater or you're going and playing Valor Christian right down here, you're fired up, okay, on those 60 days. But there are 1,400 other days that you're a student athlete. Those are the days that you have to really love football. And so try to dig in and find out, what are you going to be like in those 1,400 other days? You know, where you're going to class, you got your backpack on, and you know, you've got 2 papers due and a quiz in math, and you got a strength coach that you got to be in there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you got meetings and you got practice, and I don't feel like I have time to do anything on my own. And it's in those moments, do you still really love what you're doing? Because it's so glamorous from the outside about this experience that we all have, because everybody sees the games on Saturday on TV, and Ralphie's running out Folsom Field and there's a black buffalo there or whatever it may be, or I'm at Clemson and I'm rubbing Howard's Rock and running down the hill. But, you know, Ralphie's not walking behind you going to class, okay, on Wednesday when you're headed to English. And so that's it. Like Coach Eargle talked about, I mean, it's like, are you willing to put that sweat equity in when nobody's watching, you know? When nobody's paying attention? Or are you just about those 60 game days? You know, if you're just about those 60 game days, your name will be on that ticker on the bottom of ESPN because you're transferring somewhere. You lose sight. And I think this is where this leadership and culture conversation comes in. That's where those 1,400 days are so critical.
Yep.
That leadership and that culture within your room to understand why I'm here, to understand what my purpose is here, to understand what my value is here, and to be able to utilize those things to be able to get the most out of a young man. And, you know, that's my responsibility as a coach. I feel like if I lose a guy and one of my guys is on that ticker right there, I've done something where I have not accomplished what I needed to with this person. So, and I'm sure we've all been there before. I'm not batting 1,000. I'm not saying that at all. But every time something happens and every year goes by, you reevaluate, you reassess, you know, am I doing everything within my room to make this an environment where we can grow? Am I recruiting the right type of a young man? Did I, you know, what am I doing? So we reevaluate those things year to year. So I think that those 1,400 days, that's where this leadership and this culture has to be at its strongest, because we've all been to college. You were at Mary Hardin Baylor, a wonderful place. We all know. Okay. I'm sure you had no bad days. Okay. And I'm down the road at Hardin Simmons and we're eating beanie weenies and Spam. Okay. Down there just trying. And I'm thinking, man, how fast can I get home from here? But we've all been there. There's tough days, no matter where you go, we all have those moments where like, man, I don't know if I'm at the right spot. Right. That's where this comes in. And it is so critical. And, you know, and it's for high school coaches as well. You know, I was a head high school coach and it's now more prevalent than ever. As I go recruit, there's high school players leaving one school and going to another. This is trickle down. This is the same thing. they're having to do things. And I think to myself, if I was a high school coach, how would I operate under this environment? And it's all the same. The leadership and the culture comes back to those two things.
No doubt. I'm going to kind of split this next two, and each of you grab one. Coach Eargle, we're talking about culture. We're talking about the importance of it. All these are good thoughts, right? They're all good philosophies. We could all put on a billboard and make it really nice, right? You, in your role there at Florida International, you in your role leading the program, how did you go about implementing, not just talking about it, not just having a billboard about it, but implementing that culture every day within your program? And then Coach Smith, I want you to kind of follow up and talk about how you did it as far as differently in season culture versus out of season culture and what you focused on during those times. And so I'm kind of telling you guys those questions because I'm going to get the heck out of the way and let you guys go and I got my pen ready to go listen to it.
Well, I think like what we've been hitting on, I think culture is really, really intentional. So I think that if we're going to implement this every day, I by nature of the question, we're inferring that it's intentional, that you're doing this, it's an everyday thing, and it's something we're really going to put our hand to. But I think that all of us, we have this game of football. It's going to put us in situations where what's inside of us is going to come out. So I think that for us creating opportunities for this culture to be displayed, for our character to be displayed, is an easy part for us as coaches, to be real honest with you. What we've got to do a really good job is in any leadership, whether it's in my tight end room, whether it's a head football coach somewhere, whatever you're doing, is you've got to look for those opportunities. And when you find them, then you've got to point out what happened, good or bad. And we've got to be able to learn from those, good or bad. So if we go to an inside drill and man, we just fold the tent, we end up being like one of those daggum tight ends Coach Smith was talking about. And we thump a couple of times, all of a sudden we start turning it down. That's not who we want to be. So how are we going to address that? And there's a couple of different ways knowing our players that you've got to be able to do that. And we all love to push that button right in that moment and jump right square in the middle of that play and get in that guy's face and say, listen, man, this ain't us. It's what we're doing. What you did was completely wrong, in a little bit different tone possibly. But then there's that way, and that's effective at times. But when the emotions have subsided, I really believe that with this generation, we can accomplish so much more. And so when the emotion of that moment, we want to draw attention to the moment. We want to back off of that, whatever it was, whether it was inside drill that we talked about, or whether it was some team building activity we did, right? We snapshot, we draw attention to it, we back off. And then when the emotion subsides from that issue, when he's calmed down, when you've calmed down, when clear minds can prevail, now we address that with him individually, with my position group, as a tight end group. All right, like what happened with this? Where did we go wrong? What was great about it, man? I love the way that, man, our technique was coming through when we needed to come through. Man, I don't like the way that, man, we didn't take the fight in that drill when the emotion rose on the other side. We didn't match it with our emotion, right? We cowered down for a play or two, and we let that emotion slip away. How can we gain that back? And having serious talks when that emotion gets out of that situation, I think can be so much more fruitful, or I found that to be, with some of the guys that I've coached in today's culture with today's kids.
Yeah, talk about Coach Smith as far as kind of how you, as far as your linebacker rooms, and also at times when you've been the leader of the program, is there a difference in implementation of that culture versus, hey, we got to get ready this week to go play a game. On Saturday, we got to be ready at 1:00. That ball is going to kick off. So no matter what happened in the past, 1:00, you got to get them ready to go. Is there a difference in how you handle that versus that 6 a.m. Wake up call in the springtime? Nobody's around, nobody's looking. Like you said, it's one of those 1,400 days that you got to be able to work that. What is the intentionality? How do you implement that differently?
I think, I mean, I'm at a really good place right now with it. And I think this is a challenge of a coach. So I've been there a full season, a little over a year now, calendar wise, and played a full season. I've been through 2 springs now with my guys. And so we have a really good feel for the personalities within the room and the environment within the program and the culture that is set. So I think, every year when kids are added to your room and they leave your room, it creates a little bit of a different dynamic. So, what I like to do is to kind of feel that room out and see how it is. And then it kind of, my coaching style is my coaching style. And if it's the constant right here, then it may drift a little bit one way or the other, depending on the personality of that room, but it's always going to be close to my constant. So I feel like I have to be who I am. I can't be anyone else. I'm the boot wearing, plaid shirt wearing guy from West Texas. It's here in Colorado. So that's what you get. Okay.
Hey, I bet
Me.
you didn't stick out at all in Long Island, did you, Coach?
Listen, I was a fish out of water in Long Island, and then, you know what? But again, I think if you try to be fake or not who you are, they know it.
Yeah.
Your players know it. So we all have to be who we are. And I love it that everybody's got a different personality and they bring something different within your building on your coaching staff. And then they relate to your players in a certain way. So like with my guys, I'm a little bit, there's a little bit of chaos always within our room. Okay. So I've got a room now that functions best within that environment. So it is a little bit, some people might see it and think, man, that looks a little wheels off right over there with that. But there's a method to the madness within it. And that's the kind of room that I'm coaching right now. Now, a year ago, it was much more structured, and this is what it is, and this is how we're going to do things. And it sounded very much similar to what Coach Eargle just talked about within his group. Okay. So now it's a little more, all right, this is year 2 for me. And then my guys, there's a greater understanding with everything that we're going. So I have to balance that with whatever I feel like that the guys need at that time. And it's different for the younger players than it is the older players. This is not a business where everyone is treated the same. It's different from, within what your experience and where you are and what your level of understanding with what we're doing. So I think that as coaches, we just have to be careful within to be who we are, but also, be consistent with who you are, but also pay attention to the thermometer within your room about where everybody is, and then be able to adjust with that a little bit. To stay with your constant, but be able to move with a little bit within that range of give and take. And so it's a little bit different every year with what it is, but and also have become a firm believer. And I think being a head coach really taught this to me, that every young man is different and should be treated differently, and their circumstances are different. And, we don't always know everything that every single person is going through, but my job as a coach is to get to know that and to understand that at a certain level. And there may be a level of coaching with one young man is different with another. And I think that's our responsibility. And that's part of that leadership. And that's part of that understanding within your room. Cause I want to see them be successful. I want to see them achieve all the things that they wanted to achieve while under my leadership at this university. And, I take that very seriously. So there's always kind of a constant check and balance of like, where are we at within this relationship, and what are we doing together? Are we where we both want to go within this? Or are we off a little bit? So I think that's a constant just kind of process within that to be able to take guys where they are and get them to where they want to go.
Yeah, one of the things too, I think with implementing that culture, I'm very big on verbiage. Like for me, as a coach, I'm big on verbiage. I want to say a word, and everybody within my room understands exactly what that means in that spot. One of the things, like for our linebackers, the most important thing we talk about is we want to be fast and physical. That's it. Fast and physical. Everything else will fall into that, fast and physical. And when you let a program, we had certain words that defined who they were. And so I made every kid, they had to know the definition of that word. And so I'd come into a team meeting and I might say, hey, Mark, stand up and tell me the definition for authentic. Well, it wasn't Mark's definition for authentic. It was, when you become a part of this organization, the definition is all the same in that. And we talked about it over and over and over, because I do believe, the Bible talks about the things that come out of your mouth. The tongue is like the rudder on a ship. The tongue is like a spark that starts a wildfire. Over and over and over, we said those things over and over and over. And quick story, I had a great opportunity to talk about culture. Is I had a kid that left my program in Howard Payne. He's sitting in an interview for a job, and he asked that one of our key words was accountability. And we defined it as responsible to others for action. So you were responsible for others for your actions in that spot. The guy that he's interviewing says, hey, can you tell me about accountability? And the kid calls me. I'll never forget. I'm driving down in Brownwood, Texas, driving down the street. I'm going to a recruiting event. This kid's calling, telling me the story. He's like, Coach, he asked me what accountability was. Can you believe he asked me what accountability was?
That's awesome.
He said, Coach, I knew it. I said, I started smiling, and the guy asked me, said, what are you smiling about? He goes, because I know this. I've been preparing for this for the last 3 years. And he boom, boom, boom. This is what we were. And for me, that was the culture right there, right? That was the culture within that, because it took from the game of football that we all love, that we believe in, that has helped us become who we were. But it wasn't head knowledge to that kid. It became heart knowledge to that kid. And that's going to help him for the next 40 years. But he didn't know that right out the gate. We had to say it over and over and over and over. And everybody thinks turning around programs is a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am kind of thing. That ain't it. We were 1-9, and going into my third year, I'll never forget. I was so nervous walking out to the fields to start the season. I couldn't hardly walk out of there because my knees were shaking so much. I knew this was it, right? We got to win this one. But you keep saying it over and over and over. And you don't flinch in those things that you believe in. And those things carry with you forever. And God's been fortunate enough in my career that he's given me those moments like that says, hey, keep doing what you're doing. Keep believing in what you're doing. It's making a difference in kids' lives. That's awesome. That's
right there, Braxton. That's winning.
It's huge. I was on the way to a recruiting event where I'm supposed to talk people in and be excited and be all this. And I'm sitting there, I got tears running down my eyes because this kid's calling me. I'm like, all right, you better suck it up, Buttercup. Let's get going again, in this deal. And so I know I love hearing you guys talk. I want to hit a couple key points. All three of us have had the opportunity to be head football coaches, lead your program, to run it your way. A lot of people out there, that's the goal, right? I want to be a head football coach. Sitting in that seat is something probably often like you guys, man, that is something that a lot of people want to talk to you about. What was it like running the program in that spot? And so I want to hit a last three kind of questions, kind of talk about that experience a little bit for us. Number one, guys, if you don't mind, whoever wants to hop in there, but kind of your biggest takeaway from your experience as a head football coach. What did you take away from that experience that you didn't necessarily think going into that?
I'll take it real quick. First, it just came right to my mind. The biggest takeaways, and I always think about things, and I always try to self-evaluate. What would I do differently, and how would I change my approach? I would listen more and talk less. Okay, that's for sure. I would listen more and talk less, and then I would focus more on coaching coaches and culture than I would on strategy and scheme and things like that. I think that those are critical elements in order to win long term. I got my first head coaching job, and God bless, Mike Fielder and Jim Bannister, the two people that hired me, the athletic director and principal at the school, taking a chance on a guy that had never been a head coach before. And they saw things in me, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. But you look back and you think, man, I would do things very differently than I did. I do believe I was great at relationships. With that, that's always been something that's been important to me. But I always felt like I could out scheme somebody. I could out coach somebody. I could do a better job of getting my guys prepared than you do. And there's a lot of good football coaches out there. I would listen more to my assistant coaches and the people that were around me. Listen more, talk less, and then I would focus more on coaching coaches and getting the coaches, maybe a little bit better than they were before I hired them. And then also time with the culture within the team. Those are some things that were big to me as well. And I learned this lesson as well. And then I'll turn it over to Coach right there to hear what he's got to say. Braxton, you and I have been defensive guys our entire career. I felt like early on in my head coaching career, I was still kind of that defensive guy. And, if the defense had a good practice, when I called the team up at the end, well, guess what? I was in a good mood. I was happy. I was excited. Uh, and then, if the defense had a bad practice, well, I was upset. It just wasn't a good day. And I didn't have the correct balance as a head coach early on in my coaching career that way. And it was all, I am who I am. It's all over my face. And I don't believe I was the best head coach that I could be in those first couple of years, but I got much better at that and realized that as a head coach, you get to cheer for whoever wins and does well, and you want that.
Yeah.
You want that, you always win, and you want that balance within your team. But I wasn't as good, and I think a lot of that just comes with maturity as well, and some of that just comes with age. But anyways, that's just a couple of my thoughts. Coach, what do you think?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was just the magnitude of the decisions that you make.
Mm-hmm.
Want to be a head football coach, to you're looking dead in the eye of a diversity that's going to affect everybody in the building.
Yeah.
The men you sit around the table with, or whoever's around your table. So I'm talking about all their significant other, their wives, their children.
Mm-hmm.
They moved to the city for you. Talking about all the trainers and their family, like the athletic director, he's depending on you. I mean,
yeah.
The sheer magnitude, and it only, every level you're on has got a different number of people, but when, as you as a head football coach or in that leadership position are making those calls, the sheer magnitude of that. And so, for anybody who hadn't been a head football coach that might want to be a head football coach, that was something I would definitely take into account of when you surround yourself with those people and they're going to invest in you, they're looking to you on a daily basis. And there's decisions, but man, there's going to be some really, really tough decisions. And it's going to affect everybody in that building, and they're counting on you to make the right one, the best one for that program to move everybody forward. And as a head football coach, it just becomes so much less about you and more about those other people. And I think the effective football coaches have figured that out, that when they sit in a chair and they do make those decisions, that's who's flashing in their mind. Yes, it's their wife. Yes, it's their kids, no question. But it's the people they sit around the table with, and it's their families. They're sitting in homes, counting on you to make the right call. And I think the decisions is just something you can't get away when you're in a leadership position of that magnitude.
I love that, because I always thought kind of what you said is there's always a right and there's a wrong. Then you sit in that seat, and sometimes there's just the lesser. You got to make the lesser of the bad choice that doesn't hurt your program. One of the things that, I don't know how you guys dealt with this, but you become a head football coach and everybody says, you need to have a list of guys and this and this. Well, that's great. But there's very few jobs that you can get all those guys that you want.
Yeah.
And so then how do you as a leader work through that? That was one of the things for me is, I always thought there's a right and wrong as an assistant. It's either A or B, and there's no, well, it could be both, right? Like it's either that or that. And I was that guy, as an assistant coach. And then you sit in that seat and you go, well, geez, neither one of these are the right choice. Neither one of these are what I want to do. But I've got to your point, I've got to make the best choice for our program to be able to help continue us to be able to move on. That's something I wasn't prepared for, to be honest with you. I always thought there was a right or a wrong when the situation was put in front of me, and there is no clear-cut right or wrong. It's just which one is the best one for that day or the program that you're trying to be able to grow in that spot. Those were the choices those were the ones that really stuck with me, because you could see both sides of that spot. And so that was something that really kind of grew with me. Kind of leading to the next question as we go through this. Both of you guys have been a head coach. All three of us have been a head coach. All three of us, I think it's interesting just kind of how this worked out. I didn't know it until I started looking at everything, but all three of us have been a head football coach. All three of us have been coordinators on coordinated side of the ball. All three of us have been recruiting coordinators at the college level and been successful with that. In your role in running your room, how do you think you're a better assistant now that you've been a head football coach? And what do you see differently in that seat?
I would like to, I don't want to take this first. I want to pitch it to Coach Eargle right there, because I know, he's got a perspective on this as well. And he's also, working a lot like Mike McIntyre, who had been a head coach for many years and went to be an assistant and now back to a head coach. Kind of from your perspective of being around him and yourself, what have you kind of gleaned from this experience where you're at, Coach?
Well, I think the first thing that I try to do is I try to take things off his plate, meaning the coach of the tight end room at FIU. If I can handle it and it's an issue that doesn't need to go to his plate because I know those type of decisions he's dealing with, because I'm sitting in that chair, like, I don't want to hear about that as a head coach. Hey, Coach Eargle, can you just take care of that for me? I don't need to know about that. And knowing the difference between, no, you don't let coach get blindsided. He needs to know about what's going on or the event happening. I think the understanding of that and being able to handle as much as you can and take as much off your plate, and don't go running to the head coach on something that you could solve and just be a problem solver for. And it may not even be in your room. It may be something menial that, you can go all the way down as small as picking up trash without being told to before a daggum recruitment event. You facility, you pick it up, you put it, you don't say anything about it. You just know this place needs to look sharp, man. When these recruits and parents walk into the facility, we won't be first class. I know the coach wants to be first class, so how's something I can do to make the place look better? And I think just doing that. And then the last thing I'll just hit on really, really briefly is just how hard you work. When I go home in the evening, I want to be exhausted. I want to try to get refreshed on the drive home to go see my family because I want Mike McIntyre to be proud of me. When my head coach looks at John, I want him, man, he's giving me everything he's got. And if he can do that, then I can, at the end of the day, I can feel really, really good about that. But I feel like I owe that to him after sitting in that chair before. Because there's some times as a head coach, you're going like, golly, man, there's more in you. I've got to get more out of you. Will you just give it to me? And I don't want him to ever look at me and think that. I want to give him every ounce of ability that Josh Eargle's got in him.
I think it's great that the things that you brought up, and I think it is unique, Braxton and us and coach, and that as we've been head coaches, and you have a different perspective sometimes of when. I think it's funny you talked about when a recruiting event is going on, coach, and making sure that the trash is picked up. As a head coach, you think about that. Is there toilet paper in all of the bathrooms that are down here? Is we're going to have all these. We think about that stuff as a head coach that maybe an assistant might not.
Where are they going to park?
Yes, where are they going to park? How are they going to get in? Is well, what if Granny is in a wheelchair and she's coming up in here? You think about those things, and maybe not all of your assistants do. And what if it's really hot outside, and how can we get somebody inside to cool off, or whatever it may be? And I think that it is unique because from being a head coach to now being an assistant, you think about those things maybe with a different perspective. And you want to make sure that you're making that head coach proud, just like you said, coach. And in everything that we do, that there's a mindset that's just a little bit different when you've sat in a big chair and you got the big whistle around your neck. There's a different thought process to every little detail that goes on within your building. So I think whether they've been like myself as a high school head coach or you guys as a college head coach, there's value in that for me. In having people that are around me, or if I'm to be a head coach again, I would love that on my staff because there's a perspective that changes whenever you carry that big whistle. And like you said, the decisions that you make and the things that you think about, and is there toilet paper in all those bathrooms down the hall on a recruiting visit? It affects that running back coach's wife. It really does. Okay, if we're going to get these people here and just the level of understanding that changes. And also, and me too, I want to be a mouthpiece for my head coach. I want to make sure that I express everything that he is wanting out of his program, because I've been there before too as a head coach, and I want to make sure all my guys, if you want to do it a different way, go get a head coaching job and do it some other way. But I'm going to do it the Carl Durrell way. Okay. And what's wonderful about the situation I'm in now is we're like-minded in so many ways. And I've also learned so many things from him, from his different experiences and everything that he's been around. But I think that there's a big part of that is a unique aspect of it. And when you can find that assistant coach who thinks that way, and is also like-minded in that way, you found a special person as well. Braxton, what do you think?
Well, I agree with what you said. There's nothing like a head football coach, and you're standing there watching, whether it's a practice, whether it's a workout, whether it's a game, and what you see on that field, that's you. Whether you like it or not, whether it's what you want or what it's not what you want, it's you, because that's got to be you in that spot. And I remember vividly looking onto a football field and not seeing the vision that I had in my head on the football field. And being able to, there's not a worse feeling as a leader when that vision, your vision, is not being implemented with that eagerness, kind of like you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Everybody within the program, from the coordinators to the GAs to the sixth string kicker in that. If they don't all have that eagerness, there's not a more, as a head football coach, there's not a lonelier feeling than, hey, this is what I see and it's not getting done. It's lonely, it's frustrating. It's all those things that are negative in that spot. So to your point, kind of that you added, Mark, is I want Mike Minter's vision for our program. And I want to be able to put that out there, and I want to go implement that and be able to go do that with that eagerness that you're talking about, because he is the head football coach. I'm a firm believer that nobody earns a head football job. Somebody has to give you that opportunity. And so he's been given that opportunity, and he's given me an opportunity. And so whether we agree, disagree, or indifferent, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to go serve at the pleasure of the head football coach with eagerness, not just a willingness like we talked about we want out of our players, but an eagerness because of that, because what his vision is my vision. And when I walk into my room, whether I walk out in the room or the practice field or in the weight room with my kids, it is, to your point, I love what you're saying. I love the verbiage, that the mouthpiece aspect of it. Yeah. I want that to be there. But what his vision is my vision. And it's my job to go into that room every single day and make sure those 18 to 23-year-old kids believe without a shadow of a doubt Braxton Harris is pushing this vision that Mike Minter has set for us, and he believes it with everything about him. And I think that's a key piece that I've learned as being a head coach and assistant. Because an assistant before you're head coach, sometimes, well, I think it probably could be done this way, or I would do it this way, or
sure.
I'm going to go implement it this way because I think that's what's best. Well, if Mike Minter says, hey, we're going to focus on fast and physical, dadgummit, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk in my room and I'm going to write on the whiteboard as big as you say is fast and physical, because I want everybody to know it's not Braxton Harris's translation of Mike Minter's vision. No, that's not how this works. And I think we kid ourselves as coaches sometimes. Well, I'm just translating what he's saying so that my guys get it. No, it's got to be the mouthpiece, to your point, Coach. Right. It's got to be the direct words that come out of his mouth. So, I think I'm a lot better of assistant coach now than I was before I was a head coach.
No doubt. Absolutely.
I've called my previous head coach and apologized. I wasn't very good assistant.
Yeah. Hey, Braxton, Coach, and Pat, I apologize, but I have to leave now. I got to go pick up my daughter at youth group.
Don't miss that, Coach.
Yeah. I got to this has been wonderful, and I appreciate you guys for including me in this. And I hate to just bail out a little bit early, but I do. I got to go pick her up. I told my wife I'd get her.
Don't get in trouble with your head coach.
All right. Yeah, I won't. Thank you guys. Good seeing you guys.
Thank you, Coach.
Good to see you.
Okay. All right,
Coach.
All right.
Hey, Joshua, I want to ask kind of one more thing before we get off and give you a chance to be able to do it. Kind of talking about you and your experiences right here. You've been a head coach, you've been an assistant coach, you've been a coordinator in all those roles. Given the opportunity to be a head football coach and lead a program again, what do you think that would look like differently than it did in the past?
Well, first of all, Braxton, this has been fun, right? I mean, this has been, like you said, there's been a bunch of guys just on the back porch just enjoying some conversation about an unbelievable sport that we get to be a part of. Man, what a privilege. If you get another opportunity, or if I get another opportunity, I think the number one thing I need to do, and it's a must for me, is to soak in every moment. You focus so much on getting to a destination. Everybody talks about the journey now. And I get that's kind of a catchphrase, and we lose focus of what that really, really means. But like we were talking about earlier, you focus on such those small details, maybe the recruiting visit or the small details of practice. I want practice to be a certain way. I want this drill to take place here, and I want the transition to be like this, and all those things which are so, so important. But to celebrate the small victories on a day-to-day basis before we get to that Saturday night locker room when we're celebrating the big victories, I think is something that I would really, really cherish in doing again, and just celebrating the victories maybe for one individual, on that team, maybe be an individual in that coaching staff that really overcame something that was really, really a personal battle for him, or a milestone in their coaching career, a personal accomplishment within the team setting, or maybe even one side of the ball, but just to really, really find ways to continually praise the small things about that are leading to the victories. They're a part of that culture we've talked about, and just really kind of soaking that some of that more in as to trying to hit the big chunks and trying to get there faster and trying to be sure that we're hitting this amount of wins or this championship or this amount of successes, you know, on a given Saturday, whatever your standards are, whatever your goals are. But just to celebrate the small things that lead to that, and that you know that's still going to be a part of your culture, that's still going to lead to who you want to be and the pillars of your program. But focus more on those minute wins that are getting us there would be my number one thing.
Yeah, it's funny that the thing that I wrote down as far as that you get to do is enjoy the players, enjoy the relationships, enjoy that aspect of it more. I spent a lot of my days putting out fires and fixing problems, and I had really good people around me. But by the time I got to the good people that I had around me, I'd already dealt with everything else in my day. I didn't appreciate them because they didn't need my attention as much as all the other problems that I had in that spot. You know, I would appreciate those relationships. I would appreciate the professors on campus that send you a note that they want you to be successful. Don't focus on the ones that don't. Focus on the ones that do. When you get to do those things, and you know that's the other thing is I think you know there's such a whirlwind of leadership. There's a whirlwind that comes every single day, and I'm reading a book that talks about it right now. It talks about the whirlwind of your day. It's going to take up 80% of your time, and it can take up 80%, coach, but it can't take up the 20%. Because that 20% has got to be on what the main thing is. What's the most important thing for you to be able to go do to get that done? And that's the thing I would focus on is yes, the whirlwind. You can't put the whirlwind aside as a leader. Whether you're leading the tight ends at FIU or you're leading the linebackers here at Campbell, the whirlwind's coming for you. It's coming through the day. But to be disciplined enough as a leader to not allow it that 20%, to make sure that 20% is focused on what we're talking about right here, talking about who we are, not about what the situation is or where we're at in that spot. And love that we got to spend that 20 minutes on that, or that 20% on that. Not get downtrodden by the 80%, but be excited about the 20% that you got to do exactly what you love to do. And that for me, I dreamed of doing ever since I was a little kid. So, Coach, thank you so much for being on here. As always, I love the opportunity to be able to listen and to hear your heart for what you do and how you go about do it. And man, I just appreciate you being on here, Coach. Appreciate you for being here.
No, thank you, Braxton. Pat, it's been phenomenal. I've enjoyed it, thoroughly enjoyed it. Enjoyed, Pat, what you put out on a daily basis, and enjoy taking advantage of all the resources that you're helping our profession out with so much.
This was great. Really appreciate you both jumping on with us tonight.
Absolutely.